I fumbled with my shoes, trying to get the buckle on one to fasten. This is why I like boots and sandals. A simple zipper or just a strap that you slide over your heel. Dress shoes were never a simple matter, despite years of using fingers. The tiny spoke on the buckle finally slid through the equally small hole in the strap, securing my heels to my feet. I stood and stopped by my mirror for a moment, making sure my hair and makeup was still intact. I brushed a stray wisp of hair back before smiling and giving myself a set of finger guns. "Here we go," I said to myself, picking up a wrap in my purse. "Nothing to worry about, Sunset. Everything is right in place." I stopped by the refrigerator to pull out the corsage I had bought. The purple and pink flower made me smile as I walked out of my car. Tonight should be perfect. I was ready early and I had reservations at Tudor's. It wasn't until I was halfway to Twilight's that I realized that I hadn't met her folks yet. It wasn't one of her folks that opened the door at my knocking. It was worse, her big brother. Shining Armor looked me up and down for a moment before stepping aside and motioning me inside. He led me to a nice and welcoming living room and pointed to a chair.
"Sit! Twilight isn't ready yet, so you and I have some time to talk."
I gulped. This wasn't anything like the Shining Armor I had met across the mirror. He was much more menacing and imposing despite being dressed in a simple sweatshirt and jeans. I settled gently down in the chair, hands in my lap trying not to grab and wrinkle the rose and orange skirts with my worrying.
"So, what are your intentions with my sister?"
I opened my mouth to respond and was cut off by an angry voice from behind. "Shining Armor!" Cadence reprimanded in a voice similar to Vice Principal Luna when she caught students loitering in the halls. "We talked about this. I told you not to try and intimidate Sunset." I turned and watched Cadence stride around the landing of the stairs and home in on the young man, who had turned a little red and grinned sheepishly. It was odd seeing her in casual clothing as the only times we had met previously. She had been in her official capacity and therefore in more formal clothing.
"It's my responsibility, Katie. I'm her big brother and in charge while Mom and Dad are out of town."
She just stared at him, arms crossed and an administrative look on her face. He fidgeted before sighing and raising his hands.
"You're right."
"That's right," Cadence said before sweeping up and placing a small kiss on his cheek. "Now behave. Sunset is probably nervous enough as it is." She turned and smiled at me. "That is a lovely dress, Sunset," she remarked as she sat next to Shining Armor. "I really like how it complements your hair." "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a little bit of a blush forming on my cheeks. My friend Rarity designed it. "She did Twilight's too, and I find it really makes her shine. So, what are your plans?" I worried my fingers for a moment. "I have a reservation at Tudor's in about a half hour." I answered. "I hope she likes it then. I've never really been there before." Shining Armor smiled and chuckled.
"I'm sure she'll enjoy it. It was the place we went to celebrate when she got the preliminary acceptance to Everton. I think you like it too. It's got a decent pub grub fare."
I smiled. "Sounds like I made a good choice then."
A good choice in what?
A quiet voice said from behind me, and time slowed as I turned and saw Twilight in her dress. She made a slow turn as she touched down on the bottom of the stairs.
How do I look?
Her backless bodice was a soft blue that set off her hair with a few embroidered stars around the start of the skirt, which slowly faded into the color of a nighttime sky with iridescent thread sparkling with the light to mimic stars twinkling in my girlfriend's namesake. She had her hair up in a simple crown braid, a flower-headed pin holding it in place. The outfit was capped by a pair of heels that shared the same color progression as the dress. I smiled as she finished her turn, hearing Cadence make a cooing sound, though I knew intellectually she had already seen her. "You look perfect, Twi." I stood and held out the corsage. But this would be just the icing on the cake. Twilight took the corsage and slipped it out of the box, sniffing it and smiling shyly before slipping it onto her wrist.
But I didn't get one for you.
I took her hands in mine and gave them a small squeeze. "How about you be my flower?" I whispered, pushing some reassurance through her bond. She smiled, meeting my eyes. I could have stared into her eyes all night, and probably would have if a combined off from both Cadence and Shining Armor sent us both into fierce blushes and hurried goodbyes.
I'm sorry about them,
Twilight said as we walked out to my car.
Mom and Dad always has them keep an eye on the house and I when they're out of town.
I opened the door for her. "It isn't as bad as it could have been," I said as she slid into the seat. "I was worried about meeting your parents tonight." She smiled up at me reassuringly.
Don't worry, they're pretty laid back.
I slid into the driver's seat, making sure my skirts were clear of the door before closing it. "Soon, sunshine," I told her as I slid the keys into the ignition. "I promise." She nodded and reached out to squeeze my hand before glancing around. "What?" I asked.
Did you know you have a back seat? I thought you had a minor wardrobe back there.
"Hush you!" I grouched as we pulled out her driveway and headed on to dinner.